Hi, hi, folks. Welcome. Both our audience that's here in person as well as those people who are joining us online. I want to thank you for coming out on this beautiful first summer day that we're having in Traverse City. Appreciate you taking the time to come in and join us on the inside for this really important and informative program. So, couple of things that I want to start off with. My name is Melissa, and I'm the Assistant Director for Outreach and Adult Services for Traverse Area District Library. No, it does not get any shorter than that. So basically what that means is I'm trying to help organize some of the library's outreach efforts in addition to managing the majority of the second floor where the reference desk is and where we have our adult collection and plan all of the adult programs, some of which you're coming to this evening and hopefully some of our other events. So I'm going to kind of tie this into this evening is one of our series of civic celebration events for 2026, which is America's 250th. And so we've developed a series of programs that have been happening every month of the year so far. Each month of the year has a different focus area. So in June, we're at the end of May right now, so I'm going to talk about June. In June coming up, we're going to be focusing on local government and things that you can do, information about our local governments in the area, things you can do to get involved, that kind of thing. What we're asking everyone to do is to pick up one of our bingo sheets. And so if you haven't seen these yet, they're available just across from the circulation desk. There's one for kids too. And so we're asking that you get involved in some civics activities, one of which is attending a library program just like this. You can mark that off right now. When you get a bingo and you've done everything in one row, one way or another, you can come in and pick up some TADL swag. So part of our celebration of democracy, we've come up with this little logo and we've made it into pins and stickers. And so you can go ahead and add one to your collection. I've got one for Ed here because we're giving them out to everybody who does our programs for us. And so Alice has got hers already, but I've got one for you here, Ed. And then if you do 2 bingos, you get a t-shirt with the logo on it. So please participate in our year of civic celebration and our democracy events. Something else you'll find out on the TADL table there on your way out, we did make up a bookmark that goes along with the presentation this evening. So just a little quick thing to help you remember some of the things and the points that they'll be making this evening. So I'd just like to go ahead now and please introduce our speakers for this evening. We're going to be talking about Do You Know the Facts? Navigating the Sea of News and Information. And we have with us Alice Schumann, who's with the League of Women Voters of Grand Traverse area, where she is the Voter Service Co-Chair. She remembers, she tells me, when research meant going to a card catalog. And then she also told me that she used that research to help earn her Michigan State Debate Championship of a year that I will not say. And then we also have with us this evening Ed Bronco, who is the news director for Interlochen Public Radio. You might also hear him every weekday morning on Morning Edition, and he hosts Up North Lowdown, a daily 9-minute news podcast from IPR. He's 44, he tells me, which means he learned on a card catalog, but is also at home on Google. So thank you both so much for being here with us this evening.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the librarian at James A. Garfield Elementary School for teaching me how to use a card catalog. I'm honored to be able to co-present tonight with Alice, and when she called and said, "Can you talk about how the news industry has changed?" I thought, oh yeah, I can. Because it's changed a lot. And we did a survey, we being a coalition of folks who have come together here in Northern Michigan under the banner of what's called Press Forward, which is a funding initiative. And actually there's a program in this room, I believe, at, I think it's in this room. Thank you. On June 1st to talk about what Press Forward is and does. But in 2023, Elizabeth Jensen, who had a long career in media at the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, was the public editor at NPR, and now lives here in Northern Michigan, conducted a survey of what our ecosystem, what our news ecosystem looks like here. So this is 3 years old, but I think it still holds true. It used to be, that we had just a few news sources you would go to. These were mine when I was growing up. We watched the TV news on Channel 7. We had AM 950 on in the radio in the car all the time, except when my dad switched over to WJR to listen to Paul Harvey. We read the Free Press every morning. We got the local paper, and if Peter Jennings was not on the television at 6 o'clock, I don't even know what we were doing. That was it. Now, these are all the places you can access. Many of these news sources existed back then, but now we can get to every single one of them through the internet. This is, by the way, a bias chart. There are a few of these out in circulation that different organizations have put together. This is important to me, multi-partisan scientific analysis, and they have decided, and I recommend looking at several of these, but they've sort of sketched out where they see different news organizations landing. Of course, I look for the NPR logo right away. NPR News right in the center, NPR Opinion, a little left to center. I can see that. I don't work for NPR, so I can say that, I guess. I work for a station, and I'm delighted to work for IPR, and I'm really proud of the journalism that NPR does, that the BBC does, which we also air. And I think, a lot of these organizations are doing incredible work every day. So what did we find in the survey? What did Elizabeth put together for us? We looked at 23 counties, and we talked to 50 news outlets. Some of them are co-owned, meaning they're under the banner of the same company. There were about 115 people working in news, not just at those organizations. Like if you think of the Record Eagle, they have more employees than just their news staff. But 115 people were in the business of gathering and disseminating news in this highlighted region here. And that's down from 3 years ago. So what does that mean? 34 positions going away. So that's about a quarter of the editorial staff in the 3 years over the survey time span. We have been in a better position at IPR. I'm happy to say our newsroom's gotten bigger in the time I've been there. That's not me. That's just a wonderful circumstance that I happen to be the beneficiary of. But we've gotten better and bigger because of efforts like Press Forward, which is, again, funneled using money that is sent to the community foundation here and then sent out to news organizations. We have formed a collaborative under the banner of Press Forward called the Northern Michigan Journalism Collaborative. IPR and Bridge, Michigan have come together to lead this effort, and it's resulted in some really great freelance journalism in the last several months, last year or so. Marty Link, who was with the Record Eagle for a long time and is now freelancing, led the way on this project that WCMU and our newsroom also worked on about the working conditions in Michigan prisons and the difficult things state prison employees face. Austin Rohlater he lives in Antrim County, and he's been spending a lot of time looking at township governments in Antrim County that nobody's paying attention to, or not a lot of people are paying attention to. And he found a trustee there who tried to get a gravel mine on his property, was denied, ran for the township board, won, and then used that power to try to get the gravel mine, and again was denied. And the fight continues over there for him. But nobody was really telling that story. And because of this funding, because of this effort, we were able to get a journalist to tell that story. Miles McClure is another good example. He's a freelance journalist who came to town within the last year or so. His family, brought him up here. And he's been able to find an outlet, too, to tell great stories. He was doing freelance work in Chicago. So this has been a great place for journalists in the region to expend their efforts and get the news out. We've had some wonderful partners as well. WCMU, Glen Arbor, the Glen Arbor Sun, Elk Rapids News, and the Cadillac News, among many, many others. And the way this works is everybody's free to contribute. Everybody's free to run whatever we share. So if you're part of the collaborative, if you're just linked in with us, there's no membership fee. There's no obligation to contribute so much. The goal is simply to get as much news made and as much news distributed as possible, doing fact-based journalism. And that's important, fact-based journalism, because facts, Alice, are quite the thing.
So, just to remind ourselves, there are, in fact, facts. And I'm going to give you some examples. So some facts are really easy to agree on, like I'm 5'2", which is why I'm on my tiptoes right now. But some facts are complicated. So smoking causes cancer, but it's not just one medical assistant putting that little thing over your head and telling you again and again and again that you're 5'2". It was many facts put together that helped bring a conclusion that smoking causes cancer. So facts get mixed up with opinions. So, for example, I'm 5'2". I volunteer with a preschool, and the toddlers all think I'm tall. Nobody else thinks that. That's probably why I volunteer with the preschool. But an opinion would be, is it tall enough? And there is a reason I have a step stool, and then I'm on my tiptoes. But another example is that as a fact that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. There are a lot of questions around that. Did that free the slaves? Why did he do it? Was it the right thing to do? And answers to those questions are opinions. And one thing to keep in mind is it's facts plus values equal opinions, and opinions lead to actions. So even in yourself, you can ask, like nobody can remember all the facts there are in the world, right? And so you remember the ones that are important to you. That's your values. And you use that to come up with opinions. Is the latest headline telling you something good or something terrible? And then it leads to actions. Hopefully, League of Women Voters, it leads to voting. So for today, our presentation is based on these three assumptions: that there is such a thing as objective truth. I know we've all heard of alternative facts, but they're not in this presentation. There is such a thing as objective truth, but you need the help of sources you trust to find your way to it. So whether it's local reporting or research that you do, you need the help of sources that you trust to find your way to the truth. And it is worth the effort. And it's easy to give up and say, it's all a mess, but it's actually worth the effort. And so just to set the stage, questions to ask before searching for information. Think about why you're looking for the information. What question are you trying to answer? Are you watching the news because Peter Jennings is on and it's 6 o'clock, and where else could you possibly be? Are you scrolling through social media because you don't want to wash the windows or whatever it is that you're putting off? And so why are you looking, and how will you use the information? And then ask yourself how you want to spend your time. And this one is two guys getting ready to warm up, and it says, I can't even begin to work out until I find the right news to infuriate me. So there's all kinds of reasons. Ed, tell us about some.
Well, I was going to say that I feel this one a lot, and we often have conversations in our newsroom and in every newsroom I've ever worked in where a reporter has found something outrageous, and it's healthy to take that pause even at that level and say, well, wait a minute, why would we tell the public about it? Is it important for the public to know, or is it just important to make them mad? And if the latter, then we don't do it. Okay, so where do we get our news? This is interesting. And as a person who makes radio, which you'll notice is one of the smallest things on there, it's startling. The way we get news, the places we get news is shifting. And social media, obviously, you see the biggest growth there. And so it's important for us on two fronts, I think, as those who make the news, as those who produce the news, to make sure we're getting our message out in places where people are going to receive it. And as those of us who consume the news, myself included, it's important for us to realize what we're looking at when we're looking at social media, when we're looking at news apps and such. I'm in the 30 to 49 demographic, and I would say that stat there holds pretty true for me. Even as maybe my radio portion is just a little larger than that. But one of the things that we have been talking a lot about in the news industry is AI, and the use of artificial intelligence in producing and writing the news. There's so many ways now to make deep fake videos. I'm sure we've all seen examples of, here's former President Obama swearing allegiance to another country. It's on video. No, it's a deep fake. It was made. It's so good now to make. It's so easy now to make good fake videos. So what do we do as a news industry about AI, and how do we use it in our work? And one of the things we've settled on at IPR and a lot of other news organizations I know is that the large principle is that AI can be a tool, but it shouldn't be a creator. It can help us find our way to reporting the news, and it can help us process information more quickly, but it can't write the story for us. It never should. Here's a great example of AI being used as a tool in a really effective way. The Minnesota Star Tribune. There was a devastating shooting at a Catholic school there, and the shooter had published on YouTube a video of the pages of her journal that contained, page upon hundreds about why she did her feelings, why she did what she did. And it was written in not English. It was written in an Eastern European kind of Cyrillic script. So, step one would be to stand up in your newsroom and say, does anybody speak whatever language this is? No. So they took AI and they used it to capture the pages, capture images of the pages, to translate those pages. But then crucially here, they took that translation and put it in front of 2 university professors who teach those languages and made sure that what they had translated was correct. And they were able to serve the public by getting a deeper and better understanding of this person's motivation, of what led them up to this point that they did this horrible thing, than anybody else, because they used those tools wisely. And earlier this month, they won the Pulitzer Prize for it. It was great reporting. A friend of mine was an editor on the project. And just a side note, the day he won the Pulitzer, he signed onto our group chat and he was like, oh, I lost the group chat, but I finally figured out how to use the group chat again. What a win. And everybody was like, also your Pulitzer Prize today. Here's what happens when we use it as a creator. So an Ohio newspaper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which is a fantastic paper, has always been a fantastic paper, has started using AI to draft certain articles. This has gotten a lot of pushback from the community. I think the editor has written now 3 or 4 columns about it. On one side of the argument is, you're putting journalists out of work, you're taking the human element out of the work. How can we trust what a computer has written? The editor's argument, it's more nuanced than this, but it's included the idea of like, well, how is this different than in the 30s and 40s when newspapers had a rewrite desk and the reporters never wrote their stories? They called in and somebody banged out what they had told them. I'd argue that's still a person. And crucially, I'd argue a person can be held accountable. So that's the difference in my mind, but it's controversial in Cleveland. How do you know when AI writes a story? A few good tips. Beth Milligan at the Ticker and I worked together on a presentation that this slide comes from that we presented at NMC not too long ago. So vague attribution. A reporter at a meeting is going to know which commissioner said a certain thing. We would never say one commissioner said. We name people. If you write in chronological order, generally not how we do it. We lead with the most important thing and we work our way down from there. So if something reads like it's just a straightforward meeting summary, it probably is just a straightforward meeting summary. Good reporting and writing takes a minute, and we've seen examples of a meeting ends and an hour later there's a 1,000-word story posted. I've been doing this 20 years. That's very, very hard to do. And then errors, just straight up fact errors. Okay, so here's an example. This is local. I'm not going to tell you where. And we don't know. I don't know if this is AI or not, but it got my attention because they talk about the Cherry Capital Library Cooperative. Melissa, have you ever heard of the Cherry Capital Library? No. They were trying to say the Cherryland Electric Cooperative. And it's possible that the translator in the AI heard the wrong words. I used to work at a station called KNKX, and I would introduce myself in the transcript of me introducing myself. Instead of Ed Ronco on KNKX, it would say Ed Ronco on pancakes. So you can't trust them. And I think maybe it just got hastily posted. Again, don't know for sure if this is AI, but that's a good way to tell, or a good way to start asking questions about where it's coming from. This is egregious, and I love citing this example. This is a magazine that reviews video games. It's British, and they cover the gaming industry, casino games too. And at the top of every story, they talk about, oh, all of our writers are experts. They've been doing this for years and years and years. These two people do not exist. Those are made up images. Those are AI pictures. And they got caught doing this. Their bios say, oh, yes, he's been covering the video game industry for years. No, he hasn't. He's electrons. So I'm glad they got called out for that. And that's egregious. I think that would be instant termination at most mainstream news organizations. Okay, so how do we know what to trust? Who do we know to trust, Alice?
So surveys say that by and large, so people get their news from many sources. You saw the little chart about how much is radio news, social media. But in terms of what they trust and what they find useful, someone you know is at the top of the chart. 81% of people say they find information from someone they know to be trustworthy, and 84% find it to be useful. And that's compared to local news is next up for trustworthy and useful. Good job, Ed. National news, a little bit less. Social media drops off considerably, and I think we know why. But the takeaway from this is that your friends and families trust you. And so it's worth the effort to be able to share useful facts. And I mean, I have a friend who, is a research physician. She's a scientist, and she's sitting there babbling to her grandson about some wingnut thing she saw on the internet, because, man, I couldn't believe this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, there's a reason why you couldn't believe it. And passing it on to your grandchild is not a good idea. So it's worth the effort to be able to share useful facts. Ed.
The through line in all of that on the previous slide, by the way, is if I can go back to it for just a second, is people you know. I mean, someone you know is a category unto itself. But your local news reporters, you could know them. Hi, I'm here. How you doing? You can go up to these people and talk to them. You can call those newsrooms and they'll answer and they'll call you back. National news, less so. Social media, less so. But I see a through line there too, which I think is kind of interesting. Who should you trust in terms of news organizations? I would look for these things if you're trying to find a news organization that does it the right way. They have a code of ethics that they adhere to, and they'll let you see it. They'll let you read it. We link to all of our codes of ethics on our website. We have plural codes. There's an accuracy track record. They get it right a lot. They clearly delineate between what is opinion and what is news and what is advertising. And then they call you back. They reply to your comments. The ticker, by the way, not to just keep plugging the ticker, but I'm dazzled by the way they interact with people on social media, the patience of Job. They return messages. And they issue corrections. There have been studies in our industry that say that when news organizations issue corrections, it increases trust among the public, which is it might be a little counterintuitive that if you keep telling people you're wrong, maybe they won't trust you. That's transparent and it increases the way people trust us. How do we know we're right? These are but a few of the ways. We check with multiple folks. Skeptical editors are important, not cynical editors, difference there. I've met editors who think the whole world stinks and people are evil and they don't do good journalism. Public records, documents, good reporters who have checked their accuracy can show you the receipts. They go down there and look with their own eyes. You can look with your own eyes. They've been to the scene, they've talked to the people, they've met the folks. And then, of course, sometimes we miss. And when we miss, we try to make amends as best as possible. I love this thing. I just like to show it off a little bit because it's an accuracy checklist that NPR put out. Some of them, I saw this I didn't see this early in my career. I saw this sort of midway through where I am now. And I thought, well, I know how to make sure a story is accurate. And there were a few on here that surprised me. My favorite is superlatives. I see a lot of writing. This is the first store of its kind in downtown Traverse City. Probably not. Web addresses and phone numbers, test them out. All these different things, different little tiny steps we can take. Has anybody ever had their name screwed up or misspelled in a publication? I have. Yeah, look, all the hands. Those are the mistakes more often than not that erode our trust the most, I think. When you get the whole premise of a story wrong, that is super bad. But when you don't take time for the details, that's also super bad, and it makes the public, if they can't even. I did misspell my own name in the newspaper once. I spell checked myself. It was my first time I was ever on the front page of a newspaper, all the way across the top. It was at my college paper. I got a scoop that Vice President Cheney was going to be our commencement speaker, and the White House wasn't ready to say it yet. And I got it, and I was so excited. By Ed Rondo. Everything else was right. Okay, Alice.
So, why don't we trust some news sources, especially social media? And a piece of it is sort of what's going on. I'm a retired accountant, so it's all about the money for me. But we used to buy a whole printed paper, and there were editors and reporters, and there were fewer stories overall. But the revenue came from subscriptions and ad sales. So a subscription, by the way, subscribe to all of your local media, means that overall it's appealing to you. And companies would put their ads, and they would fuss about where their ad would go. Did they want it in the sports pages? Did they want it? Where did they want it? Where did they want their company associated with whatever kind of news there is? And papers had to appeal to a wide range of people, so they definitely on the opinion pages had opinions. The Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press would frequently, what do you call that? When you recommend, endorse. They would endorse candidates, very different candidates. But news articles were expected to focus on facts. Opinion articles were in a separate section. It was easy to kind of know where you're at. Now, it comes in a stream. It's an algorithm that puts it in front of you. You are more likely to click on something that makes you mad, and the ads are associated with the things that are clicked on. So the revenue goes with the clicks, and the clicks go with how outrageous things are. So think about it before you click when you're scrolling through social media, because you're feeding the beast. And click on the stories where you really want to read them, but not just randomly. And back in the old days, if we needed specific information, we went to the library, or we asked a trusted person. You know, we asked a teacher, we asked a religious figure, we asked a parent or other family member. We talked to our friends. And so information came in a more controlled, deliberate fashion. Then we got home computers and smartphones and the internet and social media and podcasts, and the digital information world had arrived.
Can I say, Alice, I think the two of us would agree on this, that's a double-edged sword, I think, right? The way information comes to us. On one hand, it's nice to it felt nicer when things just happened a little slower.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, all these things we have now, you know, I feel like with my smartphone, I'm just as likely to open up my smartphone and see a piece of useless information
Mm-hmm.
as I am to also open up my smartphone when somebody tells me a piece of useless information and say, nah. So it is a double-edged sword. I just wanted to make that point.
It is. And I am definitely one of the boomers that my phone is in my pocket, and I've been a research nut my entire life. And so to be able to go, I don't remember that, look it up. Oh yeah, William the Conqueror, 1066. I actually looked that up today. I told you I was weird. So yes, it's available, but you have to be more thoughtful about it. Let's see. Okay, one more joke. I'm sorry, Jeannie, your answer was correct, but Kevin shouted his incorrect answer over yours, so he gets the points. And yes.
Every once in a while, when we do an interview with somebody on public radio, they'll this doesn't happen live on the air, but I'll be taping an interview and somebody will shout over me. Like, or like, really, I'm like, are you worried we're running out of time? This is public radio. Calm yourself, please. It's okay.
Okay, so we're going to move into the how-to section for just a little while. And in this changed world, it is up to us to be intentional about news gathering and to learn how to use the right tools. So that means being mindful, differentiating between the types of information, fact, opinion, advertising. What do they call that? AI slop. You know, what are all the different pieces? Proactive. So be deliberate about getting your news. Don't just let it be shoved to you by algorithms. And use critical thinking. Actively look for signs of credibility. So we have this nifty method, and you'll have little handouts to kind of remind you. And there's a great book called Verified that most of this is from. But it's 4 steps, and they can happen pretty quickly. But when you see a headline or hear something, however, when the new piece of information comes in, you're about to dive in and spend 45 minutes flipping through and reading and, stop and ask yourself a few questions. Investigate the source, find other coverage, and trace it back to the start. So those are the 4 steps, and we're going to zip through. So the first one, stop and ask a few questions. So don't start with, is this headline true? And try to learn more by reading the article. Well, you're going down the rabbit hole there. Instead, ask, do I care about this and why? So, is it a headline where you're just like, what? Or a League of Women Voters, every time something comes up about changing voter access, it sparks. But also ask yourself how important this is to me. Really, Donald Trump Jr. got married this weekend? Do I need to, and how much time and attention is it worth to me? What do you know about this claim? So I have a master's in public health. So when I see something about healthcare, I have a foundation, but I also am really aware that it's huge, and I'm not deep in every specialty. So I know enough to know that I don't know. But also, what do you know about the source that is sharing it? So is it the New York Times and they have editors and they have reporters? Or is it an influencer who's selling vitamins? Like what is the source? Or is it a fake? So there's an American Academy of Pediatrics, which is real. And there's the American Pediatrics College, or the College of American Pediatrics, which is about 50 very, have one particular perspective, and they're pushing it hard. And so what do you know about the source? And if you find it upsetting or surprising, why? What are the words that affected you most? So just stop before you even start reading based on the headline or what someone told you. I got a text from a friend. ICE is at Munson right now. I live pretty close to the hospital and it's really quiet. So I didn't think maybe that was true. But why? Like, what would I do with that information? So think about when you hear something, what you would do before you explore it. And then ask yourself, are you looking at news, analysis, opinion, satire? Because there's articles from The Onion that go out and get people all whipped up. And no, it was like a joke, people. And ask yourself, do you know enough to judge the truth? Does it fit with other things that are going on? Who benefits from this article? Like, who would want you to believe these things? Then investigate the source. And there's some really easy ways to do this. You can just look up that College of American Pediatrics or Pediatricians wiki, and it'll give you some background on the fact that there's 50 of them. And so wiki's not a final answer. It's a beginning place, but it's great when you're running across a company, an organization, a nonprofit. When you do a search, be cautious about the AI answer at the top. Ed's already talked about that it can be helpful and it can not. And so when you do the search, scroll down past the ads and look at the range of stuff that's coming across. Is it generally skeptical about that organization or about that topic? So Keanu Reeves is dead. What? Well, if he was, when you got to Google search, everybody would be saying that, right? And if he's not, then probably not. To just keep in mind, it's easy and cheap now to build a very professional website. You used to sort of be able to tell by looking, or like all those emails from the Nigerian princes, with the bad spelling, like you could tell. But you can't now. So looks are not a clue. And .org does not mean trusted nonprofit. Anybody can have a .org. I think .gov is the only one, and maybe .edu, but .gov is the only one I know for sure that's locked down. So the takeaway for investigate the source is you can't verify a website or article by looking at it. You have to use the power of the internet to find more information about the source of the article. And just a quick thing here. In the green circle, the 3 dots, if you're using Google as your search engine, those 3 dots, if you hover over it, it'll tell you the source. It'll tell you something about the source. I think in Twitter, if you hover over the bio, Twitter X, if you hover over the bio, it'll tell you something about the source. And then there's fact checking. So here are some verified fact checking sources. So PolitiFact obviously focuses on political stuff. AP Fact Check does it across different news, not just political. BBC Verify also does, factcheck.org. And I love it that Snopes is still, do you remember when Snopes used to tell you that like raining frogs was a urban myth? Well, they're still out there doing that kind of thing, but also anything that you feel is outrageous, if you fact check it, you might be able to find out pretty quickly that the same story has been circulating since 1980. So Ed, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, they're all pretty reliable. Snopes as well. Snopes got in a little trouble 10 years ago, maybe, because they found some of their articles had been plagiarized. They cleaned house and they're back on track now, but they all seem pretty, those are all pretty reputable sources. And I love Snopes for both reasons. Did the president actually say that?
Right.
And also, if one of my headlights is burned out, will aliens kidnap me?
Right.
Like, yeah.
Okay, take friend with you. Okay, so the F in SIFT is find other coverage. If something really happened, it'll be reproduced in many places or reported in many places. So zoom out also to see what the other side says, and I'm going to show you an example of that. But if it's not also being shared by trusted resources, be cautious. So Reuters.com, BBC.com, Ballotpedia.org are places to find pretty down the middle, factual. But there are also websites where you can compare the news from different points of view. So allsides.com will take a particular headline. So this was back, I think, in January. The Trump administration announces changes to federal worker protections. But it was reported very differently. The New York Times the headlines were different. I actually haven't read the stories, but the headlines were different. Trump strips job protections from thousands of federal workers. So that has, to me, an implication that something wrong was done. They stripped the protections. Sounds painful. Okay. From the Center, Wall Street Journal, which their news reporting is pretty okay. Their opinion is, I guess that'd be right of center. Trump administration to make it easier to fire 50,000 federal workers. So true. From the right, Democrats are going to melt down after Trump enacts this new rule. So again, it's being presented in different ways. But if you read the stories, they can also present different facts and true facts. But just any news story, you can't report everything that happened in Grand Traverse County yesterday. You have to pick and choose. And we'll talk about bias, but that sneaks in there. So that is find other coverage. And then trace it back to the source. And this actually is very helpful for finding where AI might be a problem. So online articles should have links to original sources. It's often in blue and underlined, and you can go back, to the original sources, some of which are fake. So keep your caution hat on. But if they don't, like Ed said before, if they don't give the names and qualifications of the people quoted in the article, it's probably not your best source of information. And for images, you can use Google's image search to see that image. I was telling Ed, one of the cartoons we looked at earlier, when I image searched it just to see where it came from, it's been changed many, many times, which is actually like a bad thing to do, to somebody's art. But it was mostly in like news literacy and fact checking presentations. I'm like, people, like, watch your own facts while you're at it. So just to recap, and you guys have this nifty little handout. And so it's got, oh yeah, and Laura, she's going for a handout. It has the SIFT method here. It has the fact checking. So it's a good summary of all this that we've blown through. And Ed's talked about videos and AI. Oh, now we're going to talk about bias just really quick. So for people my age, woven fabric has a bias on it, like it stretches on the bias and not on the other, which I think is a great image for stretching the truth. But bias starts with caring about some things more than others. Remember, you can't put every fact in a story. And so our values do drive what facts get included. And we all have different values. And that's why having an editor look at it or someone else to say, I think maybe you might have left this thing out, or, like getting a second look at it. But there are trade-offs between different values, and the most divided issues are often tough choices between two things that are right. You only have to think about, the abortion issue. There's some really valid arguments on both sides, and it's a conflict of which value you're choosing, and that's hard. So biased news stories, the ones that we're going to call biased stories, choose to share only the facts that support one set of values. So now we all just like remember the stuff we want to remember, but when you're deliberately reporting facts in order to tell half the story. So bias is not the same as untrue, but it's often not the whole truth. So the example I give, again, is two 4-year-olds mixing it up on the playground. And the adult goes over and, she hit me. And that is true, but it's not the whole story. And so then the adult says, well, why did she hit you? I don't know. That would be not true. So then, if the adult's doing good reporting, ask the hitter, so why did you hit him? He threw my toy in the lake. Now we've heard both sides of the story. We have a different picture. But this is where values come into it. So as the adult, are you going to value safety or fairness? Like which one? Because if it's safety, you're going to say, now hitting is always wrong, and you need to say you're sorry. And if you have a disagreement, talk to an adult. The other one, fairness, the adult might say, I don't know, you might think twice next time before you throw someone else's toy in the lake. So values drive the bias. But the problem is that the downside is you don't hear the other part of the story. It's easier to believe false information because we don't hear the other side. We might have thought the hitter should go have timeout. But over time, it becomes easier to take really hard sides and think that the people on the other side are worse than they are. So here's the big takeaway. Our democracy depends on communication, collaboration, and compromise. And all of that is much harder if we misunderstand each other, and we do. So this is a survey that Common Ground did, and the blue dot is the Democrats' actual views, and the red dot is the Republicans' estimate of the Democrats' views. So the headline, Republicans underestimate Democrats' commitment to celebrating American achievements and the overall story of progress. And the specific thing was, all students should learn about how the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution advanced freedom and equality. Republicans think that only 45% of Democrats think that's true, when in fact, 92% of the Democrats think it's true. But on the other hand, Democrats underestimate Republicans' willingness to recognize failure in American history and the roles of minority groups in making America better. So the question was, Americans have a responsibility to learn from our past and fix our mistakes. Democrats estimate that only 35% of Republicans think that's true, when in fact, I can't see that number, 93% of the Republicans think that's true. So we truly do misunderstand each other. And Ed, what?
Yeah. Okay. So some quick tips for social media. I encounter, gosh, I think it's about once a week I do one of these to somebody. Don't click or share. I've often seen stuff, and you have too, that boy, you really are tempted to. This is outrageous. I want to share it with everybody. Make sure. I have a former teacher from high school who will share stuff on social media that is sometimes wrong and sometimes posted by hate groups, but she doesn't know that that's a hate group posting it. It looks so anodyne when she posts it. But you look at the bottom who it's from, and a few times I have sent her a private message and said, hey, here's the group that posted that. If I had hopped in the comments and said, I can't believe you posted that. Don't you know that that's from, it would ruin my relationship with that person who I love and adore. And it would also, not be useful to their knowledge. You don't want to instantly trigger someone's defenses. You want to start by showing a little grace and maybe helping them with what you know to be true. Make sure you're sharing accurate information and reporting and blocking. So infamously, public media, social media, will often respond to complaints with, sorry, we can't do anything. And it's really frustrating. Keep reporting, keep blocking the things that you know to be harmful, because the critical mass does help. So those are really useful tips to do that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about other ways. Feelings aren't bad. Feelings are good sometimes. Trust your gut. And we had that SIFT method that Alice walked us through. And if you are feeling an impulse when you read something, start to question that impulse. Listen to those feelings. But Alice, this is a point you've made, and I love this, about resisting the cynicism, right? That everything's a lie. Nobody can be trusted, because that's actually kind of how misinformation works. And those who perpetuate misinformation want you to be perpetually confused or distrusting of things, so that you don't have that filter anymore to what they say. Okay, we have a lot out there to use, to lean on, and we don't have to take it all in. What was your example about Don Jr. getting married, right? Okay, congratulations. Does not affect my life in Traverse City, Michigan. It's okay to not say something about everything. It's okay to just take a step back. A mantra in our newsroom that I repeat every time I speak in public, and probably too often in the newsroom, and they're probably like, yes, Ed, we know, is that we aim for light rather than heat, or light over heat. What can we do to illuminate something for the public rather than make them angrier about it? Truth matters, it exists, and we can all find it.
Okay, this is on your handout, but it's also for your refrigerator, bulletin board, wallet. So remember the SIFT process and this overall framework: to be intentional about news and information, to analyze the information, which is the SIFT method, reflect on potential biases in the news, but also in yourself, and act as a trusted intermediary for your family and friends. So that is that. And then this is also on your handout in case you want to know more. There's a book, Verified. There's a slide set from the News Literacy Project. There's a whole hour-long webinar that the League of Women Vote National League did with the Alliance for Trust in Media. And if you really want to dive in, a Notre Dame professor did a whole semester on truth, politics, and democracy. And it is full of references. I mean, it's the syllabus for this college course, with articles and discussion questions. So if you have a book club that's a little tired of, I don't know, Emily Henry, who could, there's an option there.
There's a great book if you really want to go into the tall grass on how journalists do journalism, called The Elements of Journalism by two guys. Oh boy, one's Bill and one's Tom, and one's Kovacs and one's Rosensteel, but I can never remember which last name goes with which first name. I'm sorry, guys. But the whole premise of the book is that the central purpose of journalism is to give people the information they need to be free and self-governing. Period. And that's as true about covering your city council meeting as it is about covering Congress and the White House, as it is about reporting on what food your local grocery store is ordering or what road is going to get repaired next week. And it's a great resource, and it really is it's sort of a manifesto and a exhortation to journalists to say, look, if you're not doing it like this, really think about what you're doing. Why does any of this matter?
So I have a little, and the league ladies will recognize a lot of this, but as we know, our democracy depends on communication, collaboration, and compromise. And we're hoping that we've given you more tools in order to choose wisely. Isn't that what you tell all the kids? Make wise choices. How you gather information, how you share information, and how you invest your time and your energy. Because it takes good information to make good decisions, and democracy depends on all of us making good decisions.
And stories matter. And the way we talk to each other and the way we tell each other our stories matters. And if we are to run this country together as a democratic people, we need to have a little grace for each other and understand where we're coming from. We don't have to agree with it, but we have to understand it. Otherwise, we just sort of end up running a different country every 8 years, back and forth like a terrible tennis game. So I think it's really important that we keep telling each other our stories and keep, making sure that when that relative spouts off at Thanksgiving dinner, you take a deep breath and you say, "Well, I heard," rather than "You're a fool," right? So with that, I think we can open it up for a discussion.
We can, and we have microphones. We're going to Phil Donahue.
Yeah, I'll be Oprah. Here we go.
Oh, okay.
Phil, Oprah, whoever.
Yeah, you
whatever 80s or 90s talk show host. Who has I'll come to you with a microphone.
Anybody have a question, a comment, a headline you saw that you want to know how to research? Oh, we have.
Yeah, here.
Thank you. Interesting. This is kind of parallel to this. We went through the Industrial Revolution. It had stages, abuse, rise of the unions, safety, etc. Then we hit the electronic age. Maybe that's not quite so defined. Are we in a new age? Where are we going? You must think about this, Ed.
I do think about this. Oh boy. I don't know. I don't know if I'm smart enough to say, are we? Yes, we're in a new age. We're in a different time, though, for sure. I mean, it's information and privacy is way more important, I think, than any of us thought it would be. Our rights to share information and who gets to control the narrative and all of those things. It's hard to think about on two levels, because there's the level we're all living day to day, and we just want things to be good. And, I mean, honestly, I would love for things to be boring for a little while. That would be great. But then there's sort of this like grand cosmic arc of everything, right? And I do think like on that long time horizon, it feels like we're getting better. And yeah, I mean, there are people who are as afraid of the telephone as I am about AI. And we've always sort of figured it out. Is that naive? Does that make us vulnerable to not figuring it out one day and then just being doomed? I don't know. But it's unsatisfying when you're thinking about like the long arc of ages, right? We came through the industrial age, we came through the electronic age. We're sort of still in it a little bit, but like, I don't know. I just try to have patience.
Right. And we didn't come through the industrial age without impact on a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like lives changed. And for many, many decades, If you were working in a factory, your lifespan or the number of fingers you would retire with was definitely at risk. And so it took a while to get to the point where, like by the time I graduated from high school in the not to be mentioned 1969, it was a good job. If you got a job at Ford's, you were set. AI, we're not there yet. I think we're still in the early stages in learning. So it's a good question. Anybody else? Something they want to add? Okay.
I think we have folks listening at home who can send in a question too if they want to, right? Great.
So most people, or maybe not most people, but a lot of people don't have a lot of time and are just trying to get their work done, get their family taken care of, but know that they should be aware of more of what's going on community-wise, state-wise, or federal-wise. So the majority of people who aren't retired like me, that don't have the time to research these, where would they go for the most cost efficient?
Right. And so some of that is, do you just want to know what's going on in your local community? So Ed does this brilliant podcast, the Up North Lowdown, in like 10 minutes in the morning. You kind of hear what's going on locally. But if you're coming around to an election, and I know, league ladies, sorry, but many people do not think about elections at all until the week before. And where can you get good information quickly? For years, people relied on party allegiance. They voted for whoever the party bosses told them to vote for. And depending on, how things were going, that often worked out just fine for whoever that was, if their job depended on party A being in place, then they'd vote for party A and they'd keep their job, right? I mean, it worked at their level, like Ed talked about. Like, we just want to live a quiet life. Really, I mean, is there anybody here who wants to lead a dangerous, unpredictable, no. So it is hard in this day and age when there's so much information and so much division. It is hard to get quiet information. But the League of Women Voters has vote411.org, where you can put in your address, and we ask all the candidates, and if they answer the question, we put their answers side by side. So really, pretty quickly, you can see who's running for a particular office and where they stand on some key issues. So Vote 411 is actually, and we do it specifically for that, for the people who are not scrolling 3 hours a day through the news. So those are a couple options.
And I would say, I would agree with all of that. And thank you for plugging my podcast as well as your own resources. But I think start with a trusted news source and build from there. Find a local news source, find a national news source you trust, but then don't just go to that part of the buffet, right? Go get a few other things on your plate too, without having to go through like I'm researching everything and I've now spent an hour. And I would say, I say this as a news person who runs a 24-hour radio news service who wants people to consume the news. Do not overexpose yourself to the news. Like, turn it off. Turn off. If you are listening to me in the morning and you are annoyed and you are sick of it, it's okay. Turn me off. Like take a break, because we were not built for the 24-hour news cycle. We were not built to bathe in the news. So just kind of, ration for yourself. It's a healthy thing to do, and we understand.
I have the Kenny Rogers song, "Know When to Walk Away and Know When to Run." It's true for how much news there is. So when you have a decision that you want to make, then, and actually your reference librarians, truly, if somebody wants to find information about a particular issue that's going to be on the ballot, or everybody's all whipped up about the TIF proposal. Was that last year? I think. should we vote for it? Should we vote against it? And reference librarians can tell you, here's a source. So that's another option.
Can I tell you, thank you for saying reference librarians. We did a story recently on the new space over at the Botanic Gardens at historic Barnes Park. They've got that new bar, the top of the cow barn they renovated, and they left in place some scribbling from a worker, I think back in the 1950s, and he was mad. And it was like, I'm here loading hay while everyone else is at the parade. And he wrote it on the wall, and it is still there. And our reporter was like, I wonder what parade they were talking about. It was July. Was that it must have been the Cherry Fest. I said, well, call the library. Because we were Googling and Googling and Googling. We called a reference librarian here in this building. And not only did we have an answer that it was the last day of the Cherry Festival that year, and it happened to be this day of the week, we got like images of brochures and pamphlets and posters. Call your reference librarians. They love answering questions. It was amazing. Yeah. I was overjoyed. She was like, I can't believe all this stuff the library got. I was like, yes.
Sorry. Let Phil Donahue take this one.
I would say to this gentleman over here, okay. I would say to the gentleman that was talking about having time, and I was looking around, and we're fairly aged. I'm the class of '69, and and that's when I talked to other people, and they were saying, the most trusted sources are people you know. So I would exhort us who do have the time to be talking. Let's talk to our, people and share. And use the resources. And then I have a quick story. My dad worked for the Detroit News, and he, in the 70s, or maybe it was late 60s, doesn't matter, I was a kid, and the news was on strike for months and months and months. And my dad had a family of five kids to support. So he and three other friends started their own newspaper called the Polish Daily News out of Hamtramck. Dad was in charge of distribution. It was only for a few months, and he had us kids down at the Kroger's hawking Sunday papers. But did that. And then when he went back, when strike was over, he went back, and Chucky O'Brien, Hoffa's son-in-law or adopted son, told him, he said, Jerry, Detroit River's real cold this time of year. He was done working for the news, so.
Oh my.
The only sentence I know in Polish. Yeah. The only sentence I know in Polish, I grew up in a town where you learned a polka before you learned to walk. And I'm Irish, but Polish by association, I think. And the sentence is "Widzisz jak to jest," which means, you say it in traffic a lot. It means, you see how it is. It's a very useful phrase. Widzisz, I hope to God this is right. Widzisz jak to jest. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, anybody else with a question or a story? Comment?
I know that data centers rely on water, and that's an issue in many parts of the United States. Do the Great Lakes states, are they bracing themselves for data centers to be placed here?
I can take that. You're seeing, yes. I mean, yes is the short answer. A number of townships in Michigan have passed preemptive bans or moratoriums. Green Lake Township just did a year-long moratorium, I think, a couple weeks ago. I think Garfield Township has passed one. Kalkaska had somebody propose a data center. This developer actually was like, before I make any plans or get into league with finance folks, I want to see what the public thinks about this. And the public resoundingly told him no, and he canceled his plans. Downstate data centers have proceeded without, kind of against public will. There's outcry, but the townships and towns are proceeding with it. So yes, I think like you're seeing the Great Lakes states, Michigan especially, really gearing up for this sort of uncharted territory of zoning, which sounds like super dry, but is, when something like that comes along, is super important. Yeah.
And I
also am
Oh,
wondering
wait,
about
microphone.
the moratoriums. I went to one of my, I live in Wexford County and I live in Buckley. So I went to our township meeting and I asked about data centers. And he said, well, moratoriums, we are finding that moratoriums, they are finding ways around the moratoriums. And he said, so we're taking our time trying to get this right.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's an interesting issue, and as the issue plays out, when we think about where are you going to get your news from on that issue, I'm thinking about this a lot as an editor. Is like if we do a story about a data center, like it's uncharted territory. So a city planner or township planner is sitting there thinking, how do I even regulate this? A news editor is sitting there thinking, what are the different perspectives we should get on this? Who are the stakeholders here? These are the things we don't yet know either. It's becoming readily apparent very quickly. But yeah, it's uncharted territory. And exactly. And sometimes you have to do the best story you can in the moment. And then somebody calls up and says, you missed these three things. It's like, well, good news. We get to do the news every day. So we'll do another story.
And if you're interested in reading a whole book, Empire of AI, it has a lot of history on open AI and stuff, but also talks about the impact that AI and data centers and data collection is having in third world countries, and there are ways to do data centers that don't use all that water and don't waste all that heat. It's just more expensive to do it that way. And there are ways to do AI without having a billion processors, but it's not the fastest way to get there. And so it's a really interesting look at what's driving this need for this, massive data centers that do create the heat and therefore use the water. So, Empire of AI.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions on the news? Then thank you all so much for coming. Ed, any final takeaways?
Just echoing the thank you, and thanks to the library for TADL for hosting us here.
Well, thank you all for coming, and we're available for questions after.
Yeah.